नमस्कार दोस्तों। आउट ऑफ द थ्री ऑर्गन्स ऑफ द स्टेट, legislature is the most representative body. It carries the will of the people. Government of the people, for the people, by the people is not possible until unless you have the representative body like the state legislatures and the parliament. Parliament and state legislatures also control the executive branch, executive organ of the state. In this video दोस्तों, we are going to study about the parliament and the state legislature. Let's dive deep in our video. Let's see what is there. We are going to make a comparison between the parliament and the state legislature, clause by clause, aspect by aspect, and you will be able to remember this for a long time. Now, before I start, I would like to tell you about the one-to-one mentorship of SRIRAM's IAS. This is a free mentorship. If you have any doubt regarding your preparation, you can come to SRIRAM's IAS. You can meet our expert mentors. The only thing you have to do is to go to the description of this video, click on the link, fill the form, and we are here for you. Moving forward. So, the parliament and the state legislature, as I have told in the introduction, that this is the most representative body. Now, the organs of the state, if you see, on one hand we have judiciary, which is there for adjudicating, which is there for the justice delivery system. There are judges and there is a procedure. We have already discussed it in the previous class. There is a procedure for the appointment of the judges. At the grassroots level, the subordinate judiciary, there are exams. The other one, executive. Now, if you are living in a parliamentary form of democracy, you must be seeing that the executive originates from the legislature itself. So, before the executive comes, the legislature has to be there. The house of the people in the parliament, that is the Lok Sabha, and the state legislative assembly, वहीं से executive बनती है. Now, the third and the most important of them all, the parliament or the state legislative assemblies, these are the most representative organs. Why I am saying they are the most representative? रिप्रेजेंटेशन का मतलब क्या होता है? रिप्रेजेंटेशन का साफ मतलब है लोगों ने अपना वोट दिया और उन लोगों को रिप्रेजेंट करने के लिए कुछ लोग पार्लियामेंट में चले गए एज मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट और कुछ लोग स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबलीज में चले गए एज द मेंबर ऑफ लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली. अब ये जो मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट है, मेंबर ऑफ लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबलीज हैं, इनका काम होता है लॉ मेकिंग का, पॉलिसी मेकिंग का, पॉलिसी फॉर्मुलेशन का. ये सब जब लॉ बनाते हैं, दैट लॉ इज इंप्लीमेंटेड बाय द एग्जीक्यूटिव. एग्जीक्यूटिव ब्रांच जो है वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट ब्रांच है, बट एग्जीक्यूटिव इन अ पार्लियामेंट्री फॉर्म ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी किस तरह से बनती है? whichever party, political party gets the majority in the house of the people. देखिए, बाइकैमरलिज्म भारत में है. बाइकैमरलिज्म का मतलब है टू हाउसेस ऑफ द पार्लियामेंट, एक राज्यसभा है और एक लोकसभा है. राज्यसभा अपर हाउस जिसको बोलते हैं, सो इट डज नॉट गेट डिसॉल्व, इट्स अ परमानेंट हाउस. वो डिसॉल्व नहीं होता है. सरकारें आती हैं, सरकारें चेंज हो जाती हैं, नई पार्टी रूल में आ जाती है, दूसरी पार्टी रूल में आ जाती है, कोएलिशन आ जाता है, कोएलिशन चले जाता है, बट राज्यसभा बनी रहती है. इट्स द परमानेंट हाउस, इट डज नॉट गेट रिजॉल्व और डिसॉल्व्ड. वेयरएज लोकसभा हर 5 साल में नई लोकसभा चुनकर आती है. हर 5 साल में एक नया प्रधानमंत्री आपको दिखता है. भाई अगर सेम ही इंसान दूसरी बार या तीसरी बार प्रधानमंत्री बने तो वो भी हो सकता है. इसका साफ मतलब है लोगों ने, जनमत ने उसी पार्टी को, उसी व्यक्ति को चुन लिया है अपना प्रधानमंत्री के रूप में. सो इन अ पार्लियामेंट्री फॉर्म ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी, एनी पार्टी विच इज गेटिंग द मेजॉरिटी इन द लोकसभा फॉर्म्स द गवर्नमेंट. अगर एक पार्टी से ये नहीं करने बनता है, देन कम्स द कोएलिशन. 2 या 3 या 4 पार्टी मिलकर एक कोएलिशन बनाएंगी और उस कोएलिशन के स्वरूप क्या होगा? मेजॉरिटी फॉर्म होगी. मेजॉरिटी से ही सरकार बनेगी और सरकार चलेगी. अगर किसी कोएलिशन के पास या अगर किसी पॉलिटिकल पार्टी के पास मेजॉरिटी नहीं है, इसका मतलब सरकार नहीं बन पाएगी. अब एक छोटी सी बात और बता दूं, मेजॉरिटी क्या होता है? टोटल मेंबरशिप ऑफ द हाउस क्या है? 545. लोकसभा की बात करें तो इसके आधे नंबर 273 और इससे ज़्यादा नंबर अगर किसी भी पार्टी के आते हैं या किसी भी कोएलिशन के आते हैं तो वो सरकार बना सकती है. और इसमें से चुना जाता है काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर को। कौन चुनता है काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर को? प्रधानमंत्री चुनता है काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर को। जो भी व्यक्ति राष्ट्रपति जी के पास जाकर बोले कि मैं सरकार बनाने के लिए तैयार हूं, अपनी मेजॉरिटी हाउस में प्रूव करने के लिए तैयार हूं, राष्ट्रपति उसको प्रधानमंत्री घोषित कर देते हैं, शपथ दिला देते हैं, एंड देन द पर्सन प्रूव्स द मेजॉरिटी इन द हाउस, एंड आफ्टर प्रूविंग द मेजॉरिटी द सेम पर्सन, द प्राइम मिनिस्टर, रिकमेंड्स टू द प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ द कंट्री हिज काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर। पोर्टफोलियो उस समय बांटे जाते हैं। तो इस तरह से पूरा सिस्टम चलता है दोस्तों। अब क्लॉज बाय क्लॉज वी विल सी कि कैसे कंपोजिशन होता है दोनों हाउसेस का, किस तरह से पार्लियामेंट काम करती है, क्या क्या पावर्स हैं पार्लियामेंट के पास, और साथ ही साथ अ कंपैरिजन वुड बी मेड फॉर द स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबलीज ऑल्सो। स्टेट लेजिस्लेचर में लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली और काउंसिल्स भी आते हैं। काउंसिल्स भारत में सिर्फ 6 स्टेट्स में है, स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल्स। स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबलीज ऑफ कोर्स सारे स्टेट्स में है, और यूनियन टेरिटरीज में भी है, दिल्ली में है, पौंडीचेरी में है, जम्मू एंड कश्मीर में है। पार्लियामेंट at the center and the state legislature. So if you see part 5th of the constitution and if you see here part 6th of the constitution, ये जो articles हैं from 79 to 122, they represents everything about the parliament, whereas article 168 to 212 talks everything about the state legislative assembly. अब 123 आर्टिकल 123 या तो 122 तक की बात हो रही है, 123 आर्टिकल, एंड इधर यहाँ 212 तक की बात हो रही है, 213th आर्टिकल, दे आर अबाउट द ऑर्डिनेंस मेकिंग पावर ऑफ द प्रेसिडेंट एंड ऑफ द गवर्नर। ये लेजिस्लेटिव पावर जो प्रेसिडेंट को और गवर्नर को दी गई है, ये 123 एंड 213 आर्टिकल ऑफ द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के अधीन दी गई है। तो दोस्तों इनके बारे में वी आर गोइंग टू टॉक इन अ सेपरेट वीडियो। इन दिस वीडियो लेट अस कन्फाइन अवर सेल्फ टू आर्टिकल 79 to 122 and 168 to 212. So the composition, if you see composition of the house, so bicameral का मतलब साफ है कि भाई लोकसभा भी है, राज्यसभा भी है। जैसे देखा अपन ने, राज्यसभा इज द परमानेंट हाउस, लोकसभा हर 5 साल में चेंज होती है, एक नई लोकसभा आती है, लोगों के आम चुनाव होते हैं, लोकसभा के चुनाव होते हैं। एनीबडी who is enrolled in the electoral roll, the person should be citizen of India, should be above the 18 years of age, universal adult suffrage is given, and everybody, the citizen of India above the age of 18 participates in the election of Lok Sabha and forms the government of the country. यहाँ पे mostly unicameral, सिर्फ 6 स्टेट ऐसे हैं जहाँ पे बाइकैमरलिज्म देखा जाता है। ये 6 स्टेट कौन कौन से हैं? आंध्र प्रदेश है, तेलंगाना है, कर्नाटका है, उत्तर प्रदेश है, महाराष्ट्र है, बिहार है। ये 6 स्टेट के अलावा भारत में जितने भी स्टेट्स हैं और कुछ 2 या 3 यूनियन टेरिटरीज हैं, वहाँ पर बाइकैमरलिज्म नहीं है, यूनिकैमरलिज्म है। इसका मतलब ओनली द स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली इज देयर। जम्मू एंड कश्मीर में, दिल्ली में, पौंडीचेरी में लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबलीज हैं, लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल्स नहीं है। तो दोस्तों ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट इंफॉर्मेशन है आपके लिए, यू मस्ट रिमेंबर दैट। मेंबर्स अगर आप देखेंगे, सो 552 इन टोटल लोकसभा के अंदर और 250 इन टोटल राज्यसभा के अंदर। अब देखने लायक बात है, 550 में से 530 जो हैं वो स्टेट्स की तरफ से आने चाहिए, और ये मैं मैक्सिमम नंबर बता रहा हूँ। डिलिमिटेशन कमीशन आने के बाद ये नंबर चेंज हो सकता है। मैक्सिमम इन लोकसभा देयर शैल नॉट बी मोर देन 550। Why I am saying 550? Why 552 written here? I will tell you in a minute. 530 states से, remaining 20 must come from the union territories. Now this is an important composition here. This is a very very important composition. साथ में आपको ये देखना है जो बचे हुए 2 हैं, they should be Anglo Indians. एंग्लो इंडियंस का नॉमिनेशन लोकसभा में होता था इफ दे आर नॉट एडिक्वेटली रिप्रेजेंटेड, बट अगेन ये जो 2 एंग्लो इंडियंस जो स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली में और जो पार्लियामेंट में लोकसभा के अंदर नॉमिनेट होने का प्रस्ताव था, उसको अब खारिज कर दिया गया है। it's no more there in the rule book. That simply means that the two Anglo-Indians who were nominated by the Honorable President in the House of the People and the State Legislative Assembly, that provision has been declared as null and void. That provision is no more there. It has been omitted from the Constitution. इसका मतलब है 550 मेंबर्स इन टोटल लोकसभा में होने चाहिए और 250 मेंबर्स राज्यसभा में होने चाहिए. इन 250 मेंबर्स में से 12 मेंबर्स ऐसे होते हैं who are nominated or who comes from the field of art, literature, science. बहुत सी personalities including Sachin Tendulkar has been nominated as a Rajya Sabha member and he is one among these 12 and इनका कार्यकाल 6 सालों का रहता है. असेंबलीज में देखिए, स्टेट असेंबली की लिमिट क्या होती है भाई, 60 मेंबर ऑफ लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली से लेकर तो 500 तक स्ट्रेंथ हो सकती है. उत्तर प्रदेश देश का सबसे बड़ा राज्य है पॉपुलेशन वाइज देखा जाए तो, और उसकी जो असेंबली है वो भी काफ़ी बड़ी है, करीब 400 से ज़्यादा, 404 करीब मेंबर हैं, बट शुड नॉट बी मोर देन 500 एंड शुड नॉट बी लेस देन 60. बट अगेन आई एम सेइंग डिलिमिटेशन कमीशन 2026 में जो आने वाला है उसके वजह से ये आंकड़े बदल सकते हैं, ये नंबर ऑफ सीट्स बढ़ सकती हैं, ये नंबर ऑफ सीट्स बढ़ सकती हैं. तो दोस्तों काउंसिल का क्या है? अच्छा, कुछ लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबलीज हैं जैसे मिजोरम की है, गोवा की है, उनमें बहुत कम मेंबर हैं, 60 से भी कम हैं, 40 करीब मेंबर हैं एंड दैट इज अलाउड. The two states of Mizoram and Goa has 40 members, but in general there should be 60 to 500. That should be the range. Council, अब 6 जगहों पर 6 स्टेट्स में लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल है, तो लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल में मिनिमम 40 लोग होने चाहिए, मिनिमम 40 लोग होने चाहिए, और मैक्सिमम स्ट्रेंथ जो काउंसिल की होगी दैट शुड नॉट बी मोर देन 1/3 ऑफ द टोटल स्ट्रेंथ ऑफ द लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली. लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली में जितने भी लोग हैं, मान लीजिए लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली में 330 मेंबर्स हैं, 330, सो 1/3 ऑफ दिस 110. That simply means legislative council will have not more than 110 members. I hope you are getting. This is another very important provision written in the Indian Constitution. Included offices, this is another aspect. Now, if you say the Parliament of India, what bodies, which bodies are included in the Parliament of India? In the Parliament of India, President forms a very, very important part. Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Any bill which is passed by both the houses of the Parliament has to go to the President for assent. Similarly, in the states, if you see, the Governor, Legislative Assembly and Legislative Council forms an integral part of the state legislature. अब council उसी जगह पर है, 6 states हैं, and if any state does not have the legislative council, then the governor and the legislative assembly are the integral part of the state legislature. I hope you have understood all the aspects and the differences here. Moving on to the other slide, the legislative power. Law making subjects क्या क्या है पार्लियामेंट के पास, लॉ मेकिंग सब्जेक्ट क्या क्या है स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली के पास. तो देखिए, यूनियन लिस्ट करके एक लिस्ट है, 7th शेड्यूल में आप देखेंगे, और कॉन्करेंट लिस्ट करके एक लिस्ट. स्टेट लेजिस्लेचर में भी देखिए, देयर इज अ स्टेट लिस्ट एंड देयर इज अ कॉन्करेंट लिस्ट. 7th शेड्यूल के अंदर ये लिस्ट्स दी गई हैं. अब दोस्तों ये लिस्ट क्या है, पार्लियामेंट किन सब्जेक्ट्स पे, किन आइटम्स के ऊपर लॉ बना सकती है, यह यूनियन लिस्ट में दिया रहता है. काफ़ी सारे आइटम हैं, 100-125 से ज़्यादा आइटम्स हैं. वेयर एज स्टेट लिस्ट का साफ मतलब है कि स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली किन सब्जेक्ट्स पे, किन आइटम्स पे लॉ बना सकती है, वो स्टेट लिस्ट में दिया हुआ है. दिस डिस्टिंक्शन इज वेरी वेरी मच रिक्वायर्ड टू मेंटेन द फेडरल कैरेक्टर ऑफ द कंट्री. फेडरलिज्म के लिए बहुत ज़रूरी है कि स्टेट शुड हैव इट्स ओन पावर्स. State should be recognized as an integral part, not only the integral part but also the independent part. It is a independently democratically elected legislature. It forms its own government. Then it should have its own state list, its own item on which it can make laws. बहुत important है, you must understand. Now there is a third list which is the concurrent list. बहुत पुराना idea है state list, concurrent list. 1935 एक्ट में भी था, वहाँ से भारत के संविधान में भी है। कॉन्करेंट लिस्ट इज शेयर्ड बिटवीन द सेंटर एंड द स्टेट। कॉन्करेंट लिस्ट पे ये कुछ ऐसे नए मुद्दे हैं जो स्टेट के लिए भी ज़रूरी हैं, जो पार्लियामेंट के लिए भी ज़रूरी हैं, नेशनल लेवल पर भी ज़रूरी हैं, और इन पे लेजिस्लेशन स्टेट गवर्नमेंट्स भी कर सकती हैं और यूनियन गवर्नमेंट भी कर सकती है। अब फॉर एग्जांपल डिफेंस, तो वो तो एंटायरली इट्स इन द हैंड ऑफ द यूनियन। स्टेट लिस्ट पे लॉ एंड ऑर्डर, इट्स एंटायरली इन द हैंड ऑफ द स्टेट, बट देयर आर फ्यू provisions which can be made by both the state legislature and the parliament which is there in the concurrent list। जैसे हेल्थ का एक मुद्दा है। तो आप देखिए ये 3 लिस्ट बनाई गई हैं और इसमें एक जो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण बात देखने लायक है कि अगर सेम मुद्दे पे लॉ बनाया गया पार्लियामेंट द्वारा और स्टेट लेजिस्लेचर द्वारा, तो किसका लॉ prevail करेगा? If there is any kind of repugnancy, there is any kind of difference between the law made by the parliament and the law made by the state legislature on the same subject, किसका law prevail करेगा? Always and always it's the law made by the parliament which prevails. Why? Because the Indian federalism is quasi-federal. It's not strictly federal in character, and the quasi-federal state simply means that primacy is given to the union. This whole balance is shifted towards the union, and that is the reason why in the concurrent list, if there is any kind of repugnancy, it is always and always the central, the union or the parliament which will prevail, not the state. Residual power, very important power. Any matter which is not included in the lists, these 3 lists under Article 246 Schedule number 7 will be included under the residual powers under Article 248, जहाँ पर true federalism follow होता है. For example, in the United States of America, United States of America is a true federal characteristic country. Residual powers, true federalism में is given to the states, but these are very wide and extensive power. In India, we enjoy the quasi-federal system, and that is the reason why these residual powers are given to the parliament. Any new item which is not included either in the union list, concurrent list or the state list will be included in the residual subjects, under the residual subjects, and will be taken care by the parliament, not by the state legislative assemblies. Territorial extent, now both of them can have territorial extent. The territorial extent of the parliament will surely be huge. It will cover, it can legislate for any part of India or for whole of India. Along with it, it does have the extraterritorial legislation also. For example, in the Indian Penal Code, if you see any Indian citizen who have visited the other country and if does something wrong, the provision of IPC will be included or not. Of course, the provision of IPC, Indian Penal Code, Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, will be imposed on the person who is not in the territory of India but is the citizen of India. ये ध्यान रखने वाली बात है दोस्तों. It's a very, very important thing that the laws made by the parliament can be applied extraterrestrial also, whereas this power is not with the state and the power is very, very limited. There are only exceptions when such a thing can happen, when a state law can be applied beyond the boundaries of the state. But यहाँ पर सेंटर को या कहें कि पार्लियामेंट को एक्स्ट्रा टेरेस्ट्रियल पावर्स भी हैं. अमेंडमेंट पावर, भाई अमेंडमेंट टू द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन ऑफ इंडिया अंडर आर्टिकल 368, देर आर 2 ways to amend the constitution of India. We are going to study about it in a separate video, but let me tell you little bit about it. स्पेशल मेजॉरिटी के साथ आप कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन को अमेंड कर सकते हैं, प्लस दूसरा तरीका जो है वो है स्पेशल मेजॉरिटी के साथ with the majority of the states also confirming positively to that amendment. These are the 2 important ways in which the Constitution of India can be amended. जो स्टेट की रिकमेंडेशंस ली जाती हैं, स्टेट का अप्रूवल लिया जाता है, where the majority of the states have to confirm with simple majority to the amendment, they are mostly done in the subjects which are very federal in nature. For example, राज्यसभा का कंपोजिशन या पावर्स अगर चेंज करनी है तो स्टेट्स का व्यू लेना बहुत ज़रूरी है. At that point in time, a special majority of the parliament is needed. Along with it, the half of the state, the majority of the states in India have to pass the amendment. Example है कुछ तो है GST, Goods and Service Tax. The amendment which was made in the Indian Constitution by GST was passed by the parliament by 2/3 of the majority present and voting plus the majority of the house. And then it was sent to different states in order to get their viewpoint, in order to get half of the or the majority of the states to pass the same law. States cannot amend the constitution. अब फिर से there is a distinction which can be made between the true federalism which is practiced in the United States and the federalism in India. If you see the true federalism, they do have their own constitution. The states have their own constitution, whereas in India there is a single citizenship and there is a single one constitution for the whole country. The states do not have their own constitution. There were special circumstances with Jammu and Kashmir, and at one point in time Jammu and Kashmir state did have their own constitution. But that's the exceptional thing which has happened, or else the whole of India have only one constitution. Joint sessions under Article 108 of the Constitution. If any deadlock arises between the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, then a joint session can be called. Now the joint session cannot be called for money bills. Joint sessions cannot be called for constitutional amendment bills. For every ordinary bill, if there is a deadlock, and deadlock can happen because of anything. किसी भी वजह से डेडलॉक हो सकता है. एक हाउस दूसरे हाउस के द्वारा पास किया हुआ बिल पर सहमत नहीं है, या फिर कुछ अमेंडमेंट चाहते हैं जिस पे दूसरा हाउस सहमत नहीं है, या फिर बिल 6 महीने तक पास ही नहीं कर रहे हैं. इन तीनों कंडीशंस में इट इज़ डिक्लेयर्ड दैट देयर इज अ डेडलॉक एंड द प्रेसिडेंट कैन समन अ जॉइंट सेशन. अब इस जॉइंट सेशन में कोई ना कोई तो अगुवाई करेगा. somebody will be there on the chair and it is the speaker of the house of the people who sits on the chair in the joint session. See, there is no such provision such as joint session when it comes to the state legislative assembly. It is always the assembly that prevails. The council does not have too much power in the states. It is only the assembly which prevails. For example, if a bill is made by the state legislative assembly and then it transmits to the state legislative council, state legislative council can either pass it, cannot pass it, want some amendment, and the third thing, it just does not do anything for about 3 months. Then the bill goes back to the state legislative assembly. State legislative assembly can pass it in the same fashion, can pass it by doing amendments to it according to the advices given by the state legislative council, and then when it is transmitted back to the state legislative council second time, when it comes in the hands of the state legislative council, again it can do 2 to 3 things. First, it can pass the bill. Second, it wants the amendments to be done, furthermore amendments to be done, and third, it can keep the bill for only 1 month. In all the 3 conditions, after 1 month the bill will be deemed as passed. तो इस पूरी प्रोसेस में आपको समझ आया होगा कि वो बिल 2 बार स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल के पास जाता है, बट ज़रूरी नहीं है कि स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबलीज स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव काउंसिल्स की बात माने. सो देयर इज़ नो प्रोविजन लाइक ज्वाइंट सिटिंग इन द स्टेट लेजिस्लेचर. स्टेट लेजिस्लेचर में हमेशा प्राइमेसी डिटर्मिनेटिव फैक्टर जो होता है वो असेंबलीज के पास होता है, नॉट द काउंसिल्स. And the provisions of course are given under Article 197 of the Constitution. So the legislative procedure, if you see, there are 2 kind of bills. Usually there are 3 kind of bills. अगर आप देखेंगे, there is something called money bill, there is something called ordinary bill and constitutional amendment bill. Now these are the 3 bills. We are going to study about the constitutional amendment bill in the next slide, but let us see the 2 important categories here. Money bill. Money bill में हमेशा जो पावर रहती है लोकसभा के पास ज़्यादा रहती है. मनी बिल comes on the prior recommendation of the president. Along with it, the money bill is always originating in the Lok Sabha, must always originate from the Lok Sabha. It should not originate from the Rajya Sabha. And third important thing, the money bill will always be presented by the minister. Money bill cannot be a private member bill, you must understand this. और ये extensive power लोक सभा को क्यों दी गई है? Because लोक सभा is the house which represents the will of the people. The taxes are taken from the people. The money is spent by the government which is chosen or elected by the people, and that is the reason the will of the people must always prevail in the matters of finances. That is the reason why more powers are given to the Lok Sabha compared to the powers given to the Rajya Sabha in the money or the financial matters. And that is the reason why always only Lok Sabha has more power. Rajya Sabha only has advisory role. If a money bill is originating in the Lok Sabha and it is going and getting transmitted in the Rajya Sabha cannot amend the bill. Rajya Sabha can only advise the changes. It goes back to the House of the People, the Lok Sabha, and the Lok Sabha then passes it. The bill goes to the president for assent. Similarly, the same thing, the same procedure takes place in the state legislative assembly. Assembly, it has to be originating in the assembly passed by a minister, not in the councils. Councils only have advisory role. Now, what happens in the matter of ordinary bills? In the matter of ordinary bills, both the houses have equal same power when it comes to the parliament. Both houses, it can originate from the Lok Sabha or it can originate from the Rajya Sabha. Ordinary bill can be presented by the minister. Ordinary bill can also be a private member's bill. So, and private member bill can also come from the Lok Sabha and from the Rajya Sabha. And also there is a provision of joint sitting which we have seen under Article 108 of the Constitution. If there is any deadlock between the two houses, then the ordinary bill reaches to a joint sitting, and in that joint sitting the decision can be taken, and the joint sitting is presided over by the Speaker of the Lok Sabha. Now, what happens here? The bill can be presented in both the houses if the legislature is bicameral in nature. There are only 6 states in India which have bicameral legislature. We have already discussed this. And the will of the assembly prevails. As I have told you in the previous slide here, that the will of the assembly will always prevail. The bill which is passed by the state legislative assembly and goes to the state legislative council can remain there for a short period of time, for 3 months, and if it is not passed by the state legislative council for 3 months, it is deemed as being passed. The state legislative council can also suggest the amendments. Now it depends on the legislative assemblies whether to accept the amendment or not. And if the state legislative assembly transmits the bill back to the legislative council for the second time, the legislative council has to pass it within 1 month, or that is considered to be passed, that is deemed to be passed. So always, even in the ordinary bills, the state legislative council does not have the amount of power which the Rajya Sabha has in the center. This is important and you must understand. Now, election and membership. If you see the Lok Sabha, the members are elected. There are around 550 maximum. At present, the Lok Sabha has 545 members. The election to the Lok Sabha are done directly by the people. The people of the country directly choose through the method of first past the post system. First past the post system is the method which is used in the election of Lok Sabha and also in the elections of the Legislative Assembly. All the people who are enrolled in the electoral roll, people who are citizens of India and above the age of 18 and eligible to give the votes, who are enrolled in the electoral roll, which is made by the Election Commission of India, are eligible to vote under the universal adult suffrage principle, and those people forms the government. Those people represents their will and the representatives forms the government in the Lok Sabha. In the similar fashion, in the parliamentary form of democracy, the same thing happens in the state legislative assembly, and that is the reason why I said in the introduction that Lok Sabha and the state legislative assembly are the most representative bodies. Now, direct election by people. Here also, if you see, direct election by people by the method of first past the post system. Here also, here also. Now, what about Rajya Sabha? The members of the Rajya Sabha are elected by the state legislative assembly. The state legislative councils does not take part in this. Only the elected member, you must remember this, only the elected member of the state legislative assemblies elects the members of Rajya Sabha. Only the elected members. And this election does not take place by the method of first past the post system, but rather takes place by the method of proportional representation by single transferable vote. This is a unique but a bit tougher method which is used in several elections in India, such as in the elections of the president, the election of the vice president, and the elections of the house of the council of the state in the house of the Rajya Sabha. This particular method is used. This has not been used widely in the general election for the elections of the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assembly, but only for Rajya Sabha. बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स मेथड है, बहुत ज़्यादा लोगों को समझ नहीं आएगा. लुकिंग एट द लिटरेसी लेवल, एजुकेशनल लेवल इन इंडिया, इट वॉज वेरी वेरी डिफिकल्ट for the people, for the general people to understand the proportional representation with single transferable vote system, and that is the reason why it has not been included in the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assembly election. But Rajya Sabha के election इसी system से होते हैं और only the elected members of the state legislative assembly takes part in this election. वही लोग, मान लीजिए मध्य प्रदेश की स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली है तो वो कुछ मेंबर्स चूज कर कर राज्यसभा भेजेगी. उत्तर प्रदेश की स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली है तो उनके जो मेंबर हैं वो किसी the members will be chosen by the state legislative assembly and will be sent to the Rajya Sabha. Now, every state has its quota in the Rajya Sabha. It depends on the population. The bigger state, the state with huge population such as Uttar Pradesh, will have more number of representatives in the Rajya Sabha. The smaller states and union territories such as Delhi will have very less number to represent themselves in the Rajya Sabha. Whereas if you see the northeastern state, some of those states only have one person to represent themselves in the Rajya Sabha compared to 31 members representing Uttar Pradesh. So it all depends on the population of the state. Such is not the case in true federalism. If you see in the United States, the Senate, which is their upper house, which is their Rajya Sabha, which is their continuous house, two members of the legislative, two members from every state are elected by the state assembly and sent to the Senate. 2 members, does not matter what is the population of the state, what is the size of the state. In India, this particular representation is based on the population. The more the population of the state, the more it will have representation in the Rajya Sabha. I hope you are getting it. And these elections take place by the method of proportional representation by the single transferable vote. Now, Legislative Council, it's an interesting case. In Legislative Council, elections are done, and as we have seen, the Legislative Council should minimum have 40 people and not more than 1/3 of the strength of the legislative assemblies. So, in between 40 and 1/3 of the total strength of the legislative assembly. This is the total strength of the Legislative Council. It must not be less than this, it must not be more than this. Now, the representatives who are elected in the legislative councils comes from, those are 1/12 of them are graduates, 1/12 are teachers, 1/3 are elected by the local bodies such as municipalities, district boards. The assembly, the legislative assembly represents, elects 1/3 of the members to the legislative council. So this is how, governor makes nomination, and accordingly the seats in the legislative councils are filled. We cannot say it's a totally representative body. Some nominations are made, people are elected from the assembly, some graduates are nominated, then teachers, then representatives from the local bodies such as the municipalities and the district boards, all combinedly forms legislative councils, and they are there in India only in 6 states. I will repeat: Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar and Maharashtra. These are the 6 states which has the legislative councils in India. Now the powers and the functions. What are the powers available to the parliament and what are the powers available to the state legislature? They do have the law making powers, both of them, of course. That's their primary responsibility, to make law. Now, parliament makes law on the national level. The territory we have already seen. It does have the power to impose that law on the part of India or on whole of India, and also extraterritorially, whereas the state government are limited to their state specific laws. We have already discussed about the items which are mentioned in the state list and the items which are mentioned in the union list, and of course about the concurrent list which is shared between the center and the state. The law-making power of the parliament also includes the constitutional amendment which can be done under Article 368 of the Constitution. The state legislature does not have the power to amend the Constitution. It's a very important distinction. Financial power, if you see, the union budget is passed in the parliament, whereas if you see, the state budget is passed in the state legislative assemblies, and they are passed by the respective finance minister of the union and of the state legislature. Then central taxation powers are there, which is far more than the taxation power of the state, and the expenditure. So these are the financial powers. The annual financial statement, it includes the receipts, it includes the expenditure also. Now, executive oversight in a parliamentary form of democracy, as we have discussed initially in this video, the executive originates from the legislature. Executive comes out from the legislature itself. Whichever party which forms the majority in the legislative assembly or forms the majority in the House of the People forms the government, forms the executive. And there are certain mechanism in the hand of the parliament, in the hand of the House of the People, in the hand of the legislative assembly to control the executive. It can be controlled through no confidence motion. This is one very important aspect. No confidence motion, where if there is lack of confidence in the government, it may lose its majority. A motion can be passed where the support to the present government may not be there. That is what is no confidence motion, and this can only be passed in Lok Sabha, or it can only be passed in the state legislative assembly. This does not get passed in the legislative councils or in the Rajya Sabha. You must remember that. Then there are committees. There are committees of permanent nature, of ad hoc nature, which are also there in the state legislature. These committees are multi-party committees. People of all the parties from across are involved in this. Also, committees include members from both the houses, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and in one or the other way they control the executive. They control the spending power of the executive, they control the expenditures of the executive, they control the decision making powers of the executive. They are the one responsible for holding the executive accountable, and that is what is called the responsible government. Responsible government simply means that all the ministers individually, all the ministers of Council of Ministers individually and collectively are responsible to the House of the People. Individually and collectively are responsible to the state legislative assemblies. This is the truth about the parliamentary form of democracy, which is very much different from the presidential form of democracy. In the presidential form of democracy, president have too much power and he doesn't have to concern himself with what's happening in the Lok Sabha too much, concerned with, such as the United States. The president has the separate power and the executive is very much separate from the legislature. Now what goes on in legislature, the president doesn't have to think too much, whereas in India, in the parliamentary form of democracy, also in England, the prime minister has to keep in mind everything which goes on in the parliament, especially in the Lok Sabha. So the powers with the president in the presidential form of government are huge, whereas the powers in the parliamentary form of government in India and in Britain are curtailed or limited or controlled because of the presence of responsible government, because of the presence of legislature who has a bit of control on executive. Now emergency powers are given to the parliament. You see, can legislate on state list. Now under Article 249, under Article 250, the parliament, there are several provisions. The parliament can make laws on the state list. Why? Because the law can be in the national interest or during an emergency. If there is an emergency going on, then we have studied about the 7th schedule. We have seen that there are 3 lists. There is union list, state list and concurrent list. And the parliament cannot make laws on the state list, but there are several exceptions given. If in the national interest, the parliament has to make law on the item given in the state list, it is allowed. If in the times of emergency, the state, the union has to make law or the parliament has to make law in the state list, that is also allowed. Along with it, if you see under Article 252, if 2 or more states come forward to request the parliament to make a unified law for them, it will be done by the parliament. Only the parliament will have the power to scrap such a law. The state legislature cannot override that law because they have already requested the parliament to do so. So in one or the other way, it is reflected everywhere that the union has more power. The parliament has more power than the state legislature in India, and that is what is the quasi-federal structure of India. Oversights and privileges. Now, if you see, we have already discussed about committees. There are committees, there are ad hoc committees, there are permanent committees, which are very important. Here also, there are committees to keep the executive in control, and it's a very important factor in the responsible form of government. No confidence motion, we have already discussed it. Here also, there is no confidence motion. Impeachment. Now, impeachment of the president can be done here by the parliament. If the judges of the Supreme Court and the High Court has to be removed, that can also be done by the parliament. State does not have such huge powers. State assembly cannot remove the judges of the High Court, certainly not the judges of the Supreme Court, and certainly not the governor of the state. The governor of the state is not impeached but removed by the president of the country. Now, governor is a very interesting thing in our democracy because governor has dual role. On one hand, it is the constitutional head of the state, and on the other hand, he is considered to be the representative of the central government or the agent of the central government in the states. And because of the dual rule which the governor has, the state government does not have the power to impeach him or remove him. So these power of impeachments are only given to the parliament. Now, some privileges are there under Article 105 of the Constitution, which is given to the parliament, and privileges are also extended under Article 194 to the state legislative assembly. Now, what are these privileges, powers and other things? All of us, the citizens of India, do have the freedoms. There are 6 freedoms which are given under Article 19 of the Constitution: freedom of speech and expression, assembly, association, to move freely in the country. Now, all those freedoms are also available to the member of the parliament and the member of the state legislative assembly. But then you have to understand one thing. एक चीज समझना बहुत जरूरी है. when the parliamentarians, the member of the parliament or the member of the state legislative assembly are in the compound of the parliament. जब पार्लियामेंट के कंपाउंड में ये लोग रहेंगे, मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट्स या स्टेट लेजिस्लेटिव असेंबली, उस समय इनका जो कंडक्ट होगा, किस मुद्दे पर ये वोट दे रहे हैं, none of that will be discussed in the court. Article 19 also has several limitations which are imposed on the freedom. ये limitations are not imposed on the member of the parliament and the members of the legislative assembly. That simply means without thinking about contempt of the court, without thinking about the speech and hurting somebody or defamation, the member of the parliament and the member of the legislative assembly can freely speak in the parliament and in the state legislature. This privilege is extended to them only when they are there in the compound, not outside it. जब वो उस क्षेत्र से बाहर निकल के आते हैं नॉर्मल इंसान की तरह, उस समय all the limitations which are given under Article 19 applies to them, and the privileges does not apply to them. These privileges are only available when they are in the compound of the parliament. Now, other aspects, supremacy. In the concurrent list, we have already seen if there is a repugnancy between the law passed by the state legislature and the parliament, always the law made by the center, the law made by the union legislature prevails over the state. So the parliament prevails unless the state gets president's assent. Now, if the assembly of the state passes any law on the items in the concurrent list, and under Article 200 of the Constitution, that law is reserved for the reconsideration of the President, and President gives assent to that particular bill. Now, on the same item, the Parliament also makes the law, but both the law which is made by the State Legislative Assembly with the assent of the President and the law made by the Parliament are repugnant, are against each other. The state law will still work. So this is a special condition which is provided here. If the state law gets the presidential assent when the law is made on the item of the concurrent list, it will prevail over the central law. But it will only prevail in that state, not everywhere in the country. If you see here, head of the legislature, president is the integral part. We have seen, if you see the parliament, president, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, all of them are the integral part. President is the integral part in the legislature, head of the legislature. Similarly, governor is the integral part of the state legislature. Governor, state legislative assembly, and the state legislative councils. These are the three parts. Now, the state legislative councils, as we have seen many times, are only available in 6 states. Uniformity versus diversity. This is always bicameral. That simply means the permanent house, the Rajya Sabha, the Council of the State, the Lok Sabha, both of them are always there. Here, this is unicameral most of the time and bicameral only in 6 states. So that is it. That was the comparison between the states and the state legislature and the union legislature, between the parliament and the state legislative assembly. We have also seen what legislative councils are. We have seen the powers of both the parliament and the state legislative, the legislative power of both of them, the composition, how they control the executive, and the range of things in this video. So thank you very much for joining with me. Thank you very much for being with me in this video. In the next video, we are going to come up with a very interesting topic. So be with me in the next video also.